Have you guys heard the story about when Bruce Lee assaulted someone with a 1-inch punch?
What?
No cap. This is an absolutely true story that I heard from Dan Inosanto, and I promise that you're going to want to hear this story. So the other day, I was responding to a bunch of comments from people saying that I need to interview Dan Inosanto to get the definitive answer regarding some of the fake Bruce Lee stories that are floating around here on YouTube.
Hey everybody, it's Birdie here. What's going on, guys?
And my response was that there's no need to bother Dan when you think about the fact that there's like 50 years worth of interviews that are full of stuff that I'm sure many Bruce Lee fans haven't even heard yet. And well, right after I posted that to my community feed, I came across this story from Dan Inosanto about how Bruce Lee lost his temper and basically blasted the heck out of this guy. Now, how I really came across this story was when I was reading up on Dan talking about the incident that happened between Bruce Lee and his student Daniel Lee, no relation. Now, I'd heard this story from Daniel Lee's perspective on a documentary, and I read it in one of the few interviews with Daniel Lee that I'd come across, but I never heard it from Dan Inosanto's point of view. And as a matter of fact, until I read Dan's version, I didn't even know that anyone was there except for Bruce Lee and Daniel Lee. Well, I keep talking about this incident, and I mean, some of you may not know what I'm talking about at all. So Bruce was holding a private session at his house and he's sparring with Daniel Lee. So Bruce starts to show off and he's bobbing, he's weaving, he's slipping all of Dan's punches, but he's got his hands down behind his back. And now it's funny because according to all the online experts, Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do students were all a bunch of scrubs, including Daniel Lee, who was actually a welterweight boxing champion in China. Now, Dan, this dude has some serious hands, and Bruce, he probably shouldn't have been showboating with him because Daniel Lee actually caught Bruce slightly on the jaw. And well, Bruce Lee lost his temper, his hands came from behind his back, and then he just started unloading a flurry of punches on poor Daniel Lee. Now, according to Dan Inosanto, Bruce was actually holding back hitting Daniel Lee as hard as he could have hit him, but he still managed to dislocate Daniel Lee's jaw. Later, Bruce asked Dan Inosanto how he felt about the incident, and well, you know Dan, he just kind of packed his bag and he said, "You're the instructor and you're the boss." And Bruce admitted that he lost his cool and that he needs to learn to control his temper. And Bruce said that he'd learned to react that way as a result of some of the fights that he found himself in when he was just getting started with Wing Chun back in Hong Kong. And that story, that incident between Bruce Lee and Daniel Lee, that's what led Dan Inosanto into telling the story about how Bruce Lee blasted a civilian. Bruce lost his temper because, well, he doesn't like to be touched. What happened with Daniel Lee, that was in the context of sparring. But what happened in this other situation, that was something completely different. Well, one day Bruce asked Dan to come with him to buy some clothes. Bruce was always into fashion and he was into the latest fashion trends. So he takes Dan to this place where a lot of college students were shopping. Well, they're in the store and Bruce is looking at clothes. This store employee comes up to Bruce and he's like, "Hey bro, you got some fine threads. What do you do for a living?" Bruce kind of mumbled something, but he's basically like blowing the guy off because he's trying to shop. Well, the guy keeps coming around and he's asking, "Hey man, what do you do for a living, bro?" And after a while, well, you know, Bruce is starting to get really irritated with this guy. And the guy keeps it up. And then he starts like touching Bruce and trying to initiate a conversation with him. And after being repeatedly touched by this guy, Bruce finally says, "I do a thing called Kung Fu," which prompts the store clerk to go, "Hey bro, what's Kung Fu?" And Bruce replies, "Here, let me show you. This is called the 1-inch punch." And Bruce, he hits the guy with the 1-inch punch and the guy goes flying into a clothes rack. His feet are straight up in the air and he's buried in a bunch of sport coats. And at that point, Dan Inosanto says, "Well, I think it's a good time to leave." And well, they leave this guy somewhere in the sport coat section, not knowing what the hell just happened to him. Now, here's a question, like, what can we learn from this story? See, there's all kinds of fake stories floating around YouTube about Bruce Lee beating up some random karate grandmaster at a tournament and he used a 1-inch punch on him. I believe this story is not like those fake stories. I think this is absolutely true because, I mean, it's coming from Dan Inosanto and it doesn't exactly paint Bruce Lee in the best light. I mean, he got tired of this annoying store clerk who keeps on touching him, and Bruce pretty much assaulted the guy and then left the store with Dan. So look, the first big takeaway is that Well, the 1-inch punch is absolutely real. Like, I get these guys saying that it's a party trick and that it's a big setup that Bruce Lee did in his demonstrations. And the funny thing is, when I see these guys in the comments saying that to me, they don't realize that they're repeating what they heard me say in one of my own videos. And I remember the video because a bunch of JKD guys started contacting me to fight. And I mean, let's be honest, any Jeet Kune Do guy who gets upset over a comment that they didn't understand, that they heard in a YouTube video, they probably can't even fight in the real world. What I said in that video was that short range power is real, but what Bruce Lee did, it was a party trick, meaning he literally demonstrated short range power as a party trick. I never said that what he was doing wasn't real. The demo was demonstrating a principle, and anyone who understands Jun Fan Jeet Kune Do as taught by the late Ted Wong, at least according to Terry Toms, they will understand that the principle Bruce Lee was demonstrating with his 1-inch punch demo, that's the principle that Bruce Lee's JKD was completely built around. And I know that's going to go over some people's heads, but I promise you, if you look into how JKD came about, you're going to know that everything that I just said is absolutely 100% true. Now, the other big thing to take away from both of these stories is that, well, Bruce Lee obviously did not like to be touched. He completely snapped and blasted Daniel Lee for clipping him, and then he launched this poor, unsuspecting store clerk, who I don't doubt was being annoying. But launching this guy through a clothes rack full of sport coats, that's a bit too much. Now I have a video coming out about this, and it's a video that a lot of people have been requesting. But you guys know me. I need to gather all of the facts before I can just go post a video. But I'm just saying, there's a story going around about this guy, and he claims he beat Bruce Lee in his speed test, or what some people are saying, he blocked Bruce Lee's unblockable punch. And then he says that he managed to get 3 licks off on Bruce Lee. And I'm not going to get into that in this video, but given what I just said about Bruce Lee losing his stuff completely over people touching him, do you really believe Bruce Lee would stand there in front of all of these people when he's one of the featured presenters and let Vic Moore punch him in the chest and a fight not happen? Like, there's so many other questions I could ask to poke holes in Vic Moore's story, but I'm going to save those for another video, so stay tuned. But hey, make sure to check out the Untold story of why Bruce Lee really left Ip Man's school to get the story that none of the Ip Man movies tell about Bruce Lee's time with the Grandmaster. Or if you want to hear another fight story involving Bruce Lee, then check out the story on the fight captured by Enter the Dragon behind the scenes cameraman Henry Wong. And that's the fight that Bruce Lee didn't want you to see. But hey guys, we're getting ready to start packing for our move, so it might be a few weeks before I can post another video, but we'll see if I can get one more knocked out before I have to like shut all of this down and get it packed. But hopefully it won't take too long to get set up once we're moved, so while you wait on me to get back up and running again, I hope you guys keep training, remember to breathe, and come back and holler at me on the next video.